about how easy it can be to imagine something going wrong before it ever happens. You have an important meeting at work tomorrow, and before you know it, you're imagining yourself saying the wrong thing. You're waiting to hear back about an opportunity, and you're already preparing for the possibility that you didn't get it. Or maybe someone hasn't responded to your text, and suddenly you're thinking about every possible thing that could have went wrong. We do this all the time. We think ahead, we imagine, we anticipate, and very often without realizing it, we use that ability to prepare ourselves for the worst case scenario. I recently came across a statement that made me think, if you can overthink the worst, you can overthink the best. Hmm. And I thought, what would happen if we all started doing that? What if, when you start imagining how badly something could go wrong, you also intentionally spend some time imagining how it could all go right? What if that opportunity works out? Or what if that conversation turns out great? What if the thing you've been hoping for actually happens? There's some interesting reasons why the mind naturally focuses on potential problems, but there's also research on positive thinking, expectations, mental imagery, and what can happen when we begin directing our attention differently. And then there's the law of attraction, the idea that what we repeatedly focus on may influence what we attract and experience in our lives. So today, I want to look at what psychology tells us about expecting the best, what the law of attraction teaches us, and how we can actually train our minds to make positive thinking more of an automatic habit. Because if we've gotten this good at imagining what could go wrong, I think it's worth exploring what might happen when we start practicing the other direction too. Hi, I'm Jasmin Braithwaite, a certified hypnotherapist. On this channel, we explore how the mind works, why we develop certain habits and tendencies, and how hypnosis and hypnotherapy can help us create meaningful, lasting change. Let's get started. So, before we talk about positive thinking, I think it helps to understand why thinking about what could go wrong comes so naturally for us. One reason is the fight or flight response. We're all born with it. Fight or flight is that part of our built-in stress response. When we perceive a threat, the sympathetic nervous system helps prepare the body to respond quickly. Our heart rate may increase, breathing may speed up, muscles may tense, and the body becomes more alert. That response developed as a survival mechanism back long ago. If our ancestors were facing an immediate threat, or as they say, an imminent threat, being able to recognize danger and react quickly helped them to survive. Of course, most of us aren't walking around worrying about being chased by a woolly mammoth these days, but we all still have that same stress response built in. Today, it may show up as pressure at work, financial stress, problems in a relationship, family responsibilities, an argument, uncertainty about the future, or something else that feels threatening or overwhelming. Stress doesn't always involve immediate danger. Our attention can still be drawn towards potential threats and negative possibilities, especially when we're feeling stressed or anxious. So when you find yourself thinking about what could go wrong, there may be more happening than you simply being coined as a negative person. Your mind is trying to protect you. Then we add everything you've learned throughout your life on top of that. Maybe you grew up around people who worried constantly. Maybe you learned that being prepared meant thinking through every possible problem. Maybe experience taught you that if you expect the worst, you wouldn't be as disappointed if something went wrong. The more of a habit you build to think that way, the more automatically you may start thinking that way without even trying. When you look at it from that angle, it's easy to see just how much practice some of us have had in thinking about the worst. So, when something uncertain happens, some of us immediately start thinking about the worst case scenario. We may picture what could go wrong, rehearse conversations in our heads, and start feeling the stress of an outcome that hasn't even happened yet. Now, there are times when thinking about potential problems is useful. If there's something you genuinely need to prepare for, preparing definitely makes sense. But once you've done all that you can, running over the worst case scenario over and over again won't take you much further. After a while, you're just thinking negatively. And if we've spent years repeating that direction of thinking, what happens when we intentionally start repeating another? Hmm, something to think about. So let's turn this around. If we've gotten this good at thinking about what could go wrong, what happens when we start intentionally giving some attention to what could go right? Instead of only thinking, what if I don't get that opportunity? What if you also think, what if I do get that opportunity? What if it's a wonderful first date? What if I do land that new job? And what if you do become financially free? This doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending that every situation is going to have the outcome you want. That's a bit unrealistic. It just means recognizing that when the future is still unknown, the negative outcome is only one possibility here. This is where positive thinking becomes more than trying to force yourself to feel good. It can become a habit of intentionally considering favorable possibilities. Psychology often studies this through concepts like optimism and positive expectations. Research has connected optimism with things like persistence, coping, goal pursuit, and psychological well being. There's also an important difference between expecting something positive to be possible and daydreaming without putting in any effort. Research on positive fantasies has found that imagining a desired future by itself can sometimes reduce effort. You're just thinking that it's all going to go well and you don't have to do anything. Other research has found that pairing a desired future with an honest look at obstacles that are potential can support the goal pursuit. Positive thinking doesn't mean ignoring reality or assuming everything will work out perfectly. I know some people say, oh, they've got their head in the clouds, but maybe they're just rehearsing a positive outcome and you just didn't look at it that way. You can still prepare, take action, and recognize obstacles without spending all of your mental energy rehearsing the outcome you don't want. And if thinking negatively has become automatic through repetition, then intentionally thinking about a positive possibility gives you an opportunity to start building a different habit. So, what does psychology actually tell us about expecting the best? Optimism is an area researchers have studied for decades. In psychology, optimism generally refers to expecting favorable outcomes in the future, simply put. Research has found that people who are more optimistic tend to stay more engaged with their goals and are more likely to use coping strategies that involve addressing a problem rather than avoiding it. That matters because what you expect can influence what you do next. If you believe there's a reasonable chance that something will work out, you may be more willing to put in the effort, stay with it, or try again when encountering setbacks. There's a difference between positive thinking and simply daydreaming about something you want. Research has found that imagining an ideal future without thinking about what it will take to get there doesn't necessarily motivate us to take action. Other research has looked at something called mental contrasting. So, mental contrasting means allowing yourself to picture the future you want while also recognizing the obstacles that may need to be addressed. So, research suggests that combining those two things can support goal directed behavior more effectively than positive fantasy alone. So, yes, fantasy without action might not get you to your goal. But if you think about that fantasy and also think about the realities of any risks or things like that, you're better to plan for those risks, plan for those obstacles. Expecting the best means allowing yourself to consider a favorable outcome without automatically assuming the worst is more likely. The first date could turn out to be wonderful. You could land that job, or the financial goal you've been working toward could actually become your reality. That expectation can influence how you approach the situation from the beginning, how much effort you're willing to put in, and whether you keep going when things get difficult. The future hasn't happened yet. Expecting the worst possibility um, is one thing you can do. Expecting the best is another. This brings me to the law of attraction, which I love talking about. The basic idea is that what we consistently focus on, think about, and expect can influence what we attract into our lives. For people who practice it, that can include visualization, gratitude, focusing on desired outcomes, and trying to align your thoughts and emotions with what you want to experience. I personally believe in the law of attraction, and I know I'm far from the only person who does. A lot of people were introduced to the concept through The Secret, a film created by Rhonda Byrne that came out in the year 2006. So, the law of attraction certainly wasn't new back then, but The Secret brought it much more deeply into the mainstream popular culture. The film was followed by Byrne's book of the same name, and the ideas received even more attention through appearances on programs such as The Oprah Winfrey Show. One of the central messages people took from The Secret was that the idea of intentionally focusing on what you want instead of constantly focusing on what you don't want. You visualize it, allow yourself to believe it's possible, feel the feeling of receiving it, and begin experiencing a positive outcome. So it talks a lot about experiencing the emotion, and the emotion is what moves you. So, like, how happy would you feel if you experienced it? And that motivates you to keep going with those positive thoughts instead of, just forcing yourself to think happy thoughts, right? For many people, including me, that changed the way they thought about their own thoughts. I used to be a negative Nancy. I will be the first to admit it. Debbie Downer, negative Nancy, all the things you want to say, I was those things. So when The Secret came out to me, it was epic, absolutely epic. Um, it helped make visualization, manifestation, gratitude, and intentional focus part of a much larger public conversation. The law of attraction and the psychology of optimism go hand in hand if you think about it. I personally believe in both the psychology of optimism and the law of attraction. The thought of the best possible outcome motivates me to continue and be creative. If by chance something doesn't work out, I accept it with the satisfaction in knowing that I tried my best and it wasn't in my path. The common thread here is when I'm directing my attention, right? So it's, what are you thinking about all the time? What are you focusing your attention on? Is it necessary to think about the worst possible scenario and focus on that and just stay there after you've done the thing? It's probably, I don't know, for some people it's necessary, but upon deep thought, maybe it's not necessary. Um, I've spent years automatically imagining what could go wrong. I can intentionally begin giving more attention to what I want to go right instead. The more consistently I do that, the more familiar that way of thinking can become. And it has been becoming. This brings us back to the habit itself, right? So you might decide that you want to start expecting better outcomes. You've learned some things in this video and you want to try it out. But that doesn't mean your thinking will change overnight. If expecting the worst case scenario has become your autopilot response, that old habit will likely show up first before you get to the automatic habit of thinking positively. That way of thinking may have years of repetition behind it. So Can you blame yourself? No, it's just an automatic thing at this point. So changing it starts with noticing what happens and intentionally considering another possibility. When the thought comes up, what if it doesn't work? You can also ask yourself, what if it does work? Each time you do that, you're giving yourself more practice thinking in a different direction. How about that? Positive thinking can become something you build deliberately, the same way other ways of thinking became familiar through repetition. With practice, considering a positive outcome may begin to feel more natural instead of something you have consciously reminded yourself to do every time. The challenge is that sometimes we consciously know how we want to think, while our automatic thoughts and expectations continue responding on that old way on autopilot. That's where hypnosis and hypnotherapy can be useful. This is where hypnosis and hypnotherapy can actually help support the change, right? So, hypnotherapy gives you a way to work with the automatic habits and expectations that may keep pulling you back towards that worst case scenario thinking. So, before I explain how hypnosis and hypnotherapy help with these different reactional patterns, it may be helpful to clarify what hypnosis actually is. So, let me do that. So, hypnosis is a natural state of narrowed focus. During a hypnotherapy session, the hypnotherapist guides you into that focused state. As some of us, as some of the outside noises and everyday mental chatter begin to quiet down, it becomes easier to focus inward and work with the subconscious mind. And that's the part of the mind where many habits, tendencies, mental loops, and learned associations and those automatic reactions are stored. You may have experienced a similar kind of focus when you were immersed in a reading a good book, absorbed in a favorite movie, or mentally rehearsing a conversation. You're still aware of what's happening. You can hear, think, respond, and make choices. And once you're in that focused state, the hypnotherapist gives you suggestions based on what you've already said you wanted to change during your session. A suggestion is a statement that reflects the change you want to make, how you want to feel, or how you prefer to respond. You can think of it as being similar to an affirmation, right? But personalized to what you've said you want to change. Generic affirmations you hear somewhere are not personally tailored to your specific situation in a lot of cases. Like, I want to be happy. Like, that's great. But if you're depressed or something like that, it's going to take a little bit more than saying, I want to be happy, right? A hypnotherapist can tailor those things for you. An example, if someone says they want to feel calmer during difficult conversations, if they say that to me as a hypnotherapist, I might use a suggestion such as, you remain calm and grounded during difficult conversations, and you give yourself time to respond in the way that you want to. Hypnotherapy is the intentional use of hypnosis to help transform habits, tendencies, and the mental loops, the learned associations, the expectation, and emotional responses, and the automatic reactions that people want to change. Simply put. And for someone who wants to build a stronger habit of positive thinking, the suggestion would be personalized around that goal. The work might include mentally rehearsing favorable outcomes, strengthening positive expectations, and becoming more comfortable imagining success. With repetition, those newer thoughts and expectations can become more familiar and easier to access automatically. That's one of the ways hypnotherapy can help these ideas to begin to just gel in, just gel in your mind. Here's something you can start paying attention to in your own thinking. The next time you catch yourself imagining something that hasn't happened yet, notice which direction you automatically go in. If you've already done what you can to prepare, ask yourself, what could go right? Then actually give that possibility some attention and let it marinate. Picture the conversation going well, imagining yourself handling the situation confidently. Think about what it would feel like if the outcome you're hoping for actually happened. You're not trying to predict the future here. You're giving your mind practice considering a positive outcome instead of automatically rehearsing the worst case scenario. The more often you do that, the more familiar that direction of thinking can become. And over time, you may start noticing that expecting the best doesn't feel quite as foreign as it once did. I want to come back to the statement that started this whole conversation for me. If you can overthink the worst, you can overthink the best. We already know how easy it is to imagine something that hasn't happened yet and prepare ourselves for the worst case scenario. The future is still unknown, though. There's room to consider what could go right. Psychology gives us research on optimism, positive expectations, and how the way we think about the future can influence what we do. The law of attraction teaches us to intentionally focus our attention on what we want to experience. Hypnotherapy gives us another way to reinforce those thoughts and expectations until positive thinking becomes more familiar and your new autopilot response. You don't have to wait until you naturally expect the best. You can start building that habit now. The next time you find yourself thinking about everything that could go wrong, remember that you already know how to imagine the future. You can use that same ability to imagine something wonderful. If you found value in today's conversation, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I share weekly content on hypnosis, personal growth, and practical ways to make meaningful change. Also, I'm currently accepting new hypnotherapy clients. If you'd like to schedule a personal session with me, you'll find my booking information in the description below. Thanks for spending this time with me, and I'll see you in the next episode.